Leo Tolstoy once said that all great literature is one of two stories. A man goes on a journey or a stranger comes into town. But in our day, long journeys and large towns are no longer the literary exception, but the everyday norm. And as a result, we live in a world of strangers. The first thing we want to know when we meet someone new is where are they from? I'm sure all of the American expats in the room can relate to the following series of questions. Where are you from? No, I know the states, but which state exactly? And then the dreaded, how do you feel about the election results? When I lived as an aid worker in Lebanon, the follow-up questions were different. It was, how old are you? Are you married? And then, why not? But the conversation always began with my nationality. In international contexts, our country of origin communicates something about our linguistic and cultural background, and if we're honest, the relative wealth and influence we possess. But I'm here to argue today that the question, where are you from, is no longer a good proxy for such variables, and insufficient for navigating a world of strangers. As evidence, I present the rise of global cities, such as London, Dubai, Singapore, where many of us may live and work one day. And I show how the migration paths that people take to get there are fundamentally different. In the face of such global diversity, we can pull back, only befriend those who are like us, who share our same passport or fall in our same tax bracket. Or we can learn to ask better questions, and I'm here to advocate the latter. One of the most common forms of migration is urbanization, people moving from rural to urban areas in pursuit of economic or educational opportunities. In 1950, only 30% of the world's population lived in urban centers. By 2050, we're projected to hit 66%. So the ratio has flipped and will in the next 50 years. As a result, our cities are getting bigger. A megacity is known as having a population over 10 million. We had 28 in 2014, and we're projected to have 47 by 2030. Such cities bring together the rich and the poor from within a nation, and in some cases, from a variety of nations. So examples are New York and London, where unskilled and skilled migrants are drawn to work in markets ranging from construction to global finance. In some of these cities, such as Dubai and Brussels, the number of expats actually outnumbers the number of locals. The migration trajectories that bring people here are fundamentally different and unique. For example, let's take Ahmed, a Syrian living in Dubai. He could be a refugee, one of 15,000 that the United Arab Emirates have promised to resettle in the next 5 years. Or he could be a doctor who studied in Russia and has been practicing medicine in Dubai since long before the troubles in Syria began. Or take Harpreet, a Punjabi woman living in London. She could have recently immigrated, maybe in order to marry a first or second generation Punjabi British man. Or she could actually be an American exchange student whose own family legacy follows British colonial history in East Africa and northern India. The point isn't that nationality isn't important. It's actually the opposite. Geopolitics massively impacts the opportunities that are afforded to an individual. But it's only one of many identity markers. So gender, class, educational attainment all affect the sort of life someone has led. And when we just ask, where are you from, we force them to privilege one piece of identity at the expense of all others. So if this question is off the table and we're faced with people with whom we have nothing in common, where do we begin? So this is a question that I grappled with a lot in Lebanon, where in my day-to-day life I interacted with Bedouin and Gypsy young women. I couldn't ask them about their studies, which is what I had been doing for my past 15 years, because they hadn't had that same opportunity. And if I asked them where they saw themselves in 10 years, a Fulbright favorite, their answer would all be the same: married and with children. And so in order to get to know them as individuals, I had to rethink what are my basic questions. And this is even more important when migration trajectories come into play. So the thinker Taya Selassie has been very influential in my own exploration of this topic. And she really emphasizes that we think about location, culture, and challenges. So the first alternative that I present is, where do you feel like a local? We only have one nationality, maybe two if you're lucky, but we've been shaped by a variety of places. And so asking people where they grew up or where they feel most at ease gives a sense of the cultures and geographies that have shaped them. It also leaves room for the nuance and the variation within countries. We would easily recognize that growing up in New York City is not at all the same thing as growing up in Texas. And while you may not know what differentiates Beijing from Shanghai, you can ask, what makes your city unique? How is it different from the others? Another alternative is, what customs or traditions create a sense of home? This gets at culture. What are the values that your community has instilled in you, and how do you practice them, whether in the food you eat or the religious rituals that you continue to practice? This is particularly interesting in a migration context when you find out what are things that people continue to do even though no one else around them does. So this is where we get at the issue of global equality, something that I think we're all passionate about. So this picture shows expats playing golf in Spain, while migrants who have just crossed the Mediterranean try to climb over the border fence. Nationality does matter. And this question allows people to be honest about the barriers that they face. Previous questions talked about issues of culture. Where do you feel at home? But just because you feel at home in a certain place, or even are dependent on that place for your economic survival, doesn't mean you're legally allowed to live here. And by asking this sort of question, we allow people to share about that component of their lived experience. If I'm honest, I don't think we'll get rid of the question, where are you from? We're just too curious. A couple months ago, I was climbing in the Mourne Mountains in Northern Ireland when there was a fog descended and I couldn't see the path. I navigated using a stone wall, but was just about to turn back when I heard a voice from a man who was climbing down, and he said, "Can you see the path?" And I answered, "I'm using the wall." Long pause. "Where are you from?" I couldn't help but think, is this strictly relevant? But the reality is that we want to know. And so my challenge to you isn't that you stop asking questions. It's just that you ask better ones.